If I had to summarize the great culture war of 2017 with a question, it would be one that we've all asked ourselves at some point in the year. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? And specifically, is it okay to punch a Nazi simply for the state of being a Nazi? Not for threatening you, not for attempting to harm you, not for bringing violence to you, but simply for having the wrong ideas in his head. This question came before us via the fist of a masked hero or villain, depending on who you ask, with an unprompted sucker punch to Richard Spencer on Inauguration Day.
So Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
And the answers to this simple moral question vary widely. To me, there's a clear moral principle that violence is not an appropriate reaction to words or ideas unless you're being directly and imminently threatened. To others, not only is it not wrong to punch a Nazi, it's actually a moral imperative. To punch a Nazi is to be heroic, to fulfill one's civic duty. And you know me, more than ideological purity, I care about ideological consistency. If you can explain to me your values and you apply them consistently, you'll have my respect, even if I disagree with those values. But for some reason, punching a Nazi has become a uniquely justifiable form of violence. Violence is bad, unless it's against a Nazi, which is its own special category in which values and moral principles can be suspended. This dissonance was clearly illustrated to me by a Facebook friend of mine who happily posted a gif of the Spencer punching, urging others to make racists afraid again, and in his very next post decried what he described as Trump-inspired violence, blaming the Canadian mosque shooting on the president with no self-awareness that he endorsed political violence and then condemned it in consecutive posts. So, if you want to learn a lot about where a person stands in the moral and philosophical universe, ask him simply, is it okay to punch a Nazi? But today's issue is less a question of philosophy and more a question of fact. Was the Nazi actually punched? Or was the man who was punched actually a Nazi? On the streets of Seattle, an actual Swastika-Sporting Nazi received vigilante justice this week. Or did he? You've probably seen the story circulating your social media. Swastika-wearing man punched on Seattle street. Remove swastika, police say. Oh, well, thank God the swastika was removed. Well then. Justice was served, and there's nothing to see here. That's basically how this story reads. Seattle police say there is not an investigation underway because no one reported a crime, the story closes. Which is weird because the crime is plainly visible on video, or at least the alleged crime. So what exactly happened? Well, it all begins with a tweet posted by a Seattle Antifa account called Bigot Basher on Sunday afternoon, claiming to have received a tip about a man wearing a swastika armband riding a bus to downtown. The message received from the alleged informant claims the man was screaming and harassing people and urges the recipient to spread the word to area anarchists who could find him and give him a beating. That is allegedly what happened, and area Antifa associates found the man in downtown Seattle at the corner of 3rd and Pine, where some sort of verbal confrontation took place before the punch, footage of which immediately hit the social media accounts of these Antifa characters. We can hear the man saying something like, "They deserve the welfare," before taking the hit that apparently leaves him entirely unconscious.
They deserve the welfare. No, it's fine. Oh! Yeah!
Nothing to talk about.
Night night.
You got rocked.
Seattle police say they received reports about that time of a swastika-wearing man instigating fights. They responded within 5 minutes and found the man on the ground. Police say he declined to provide information about the incident and left after removing his armband, and that, as of now, is the end of the story. So what did we witness here? Was this in fact an ethno-nationalist harassing people and facing the consequences of picking fights he couldn't finish? Or is it a work of fiction that's staged for Antifa's purposes? I've put more time to looking at the evidence than I can justify, so I'll explain some key facts, I'll tell you where I lean, and then I'm curious to hear where you stand. First point of fact, I'm comfortable saying the punch itself is genuine and real. This doesn't look like some WWE acting job. If you go frame by frame, you can see the guy's face bend on impact. You can hear the sound of the impact, and after the hit, you can see a small white object bouncing off the concrete, which some people speculate is a tooth. The guy took a punch. but there are some red flags that give me caution and make it hard for me to buy the rest of the story at face value. First, the obvious point: does it make sense that even a real Nazi would wear a swastika armband on public transit by himself in Seattle? If you give me the choice, I would rather put on a bacon suit and walk straight into the grizzly country around here. There's pride, there's trolling, and then there are suicide missions. And if this is genuine, this one is the latter. Second, the timing is very precise. The original tweet was posted at 3:17 local time, and a follow-up tweet an hour and a half later shows a Facebook post from 22 minutes prior with the guy down on the ground. That's roughly an hour's time difference between the public alert and the punch. Plus, the location of the punching is only 1 block from the bus stop, meaning not only did this Antifa crew supposedly have these guys on standby ready to hunt someone on a moment's notice, but they were also able to catch the Nazi at this specific bus stop location without any prior knowledge of the stop at which the Nazi would exit the bus. That is military manhunt precision, and I guarantee Seattle Antifa does not have military discipline or skill. Life comes at you fast, they bragged on Twitter. Forgive me if I find that speed a little suspect. Third, if this is real, why wouldn't Nazi guy give information to police? What we can see looks like a clear-cut assault. Why wouldn't he want justice? And lastly, it's very convenient how quickly this event has turned into Antifa propaganda. They've made countless edits and GIFs, they circulate them proudly. It's the closest to effective memeing they've ever come. Doesn't mean it's fake necessarily, it just means it's worked out very nicely in their favor. However, there are also points that make me hesitate to say this is outright staged or a hoax. If this is a hoax, why would Nazi guy remain on scene after the attackers had fled? Why would he still be there when police arrived? If it's a hoax, you'd think he would leave too. If this is a hoax, why wouldn't they have scripted a better line than something about deserving welfare? Why wouldn't they have scripted something more convincing, like securing a future for the white race or something more Nazi-ish? If you go through the trouble of buying the armband, if you're going to be that blatant, might as well have some blatant rhetoric too. And of course, if this is a hoax, this Nazi guy has to be one of them who agreed to take a hell of a punch just for the cause. The difficulty with this case is whether you believe it's real or a hoax, there are some tricky elements in the fact pattern that you have to get around, some inconveniences that aren't easy to explain. For me, this whole spectacle is just a little too convenient for Antifa's purposes to be simply lucky happenstance. When your ideology depends upon a spooky boogeyman to sustain itself, but that boogeyman is too deep under the bed ever to be found, a manufactured sighting of him and his decisive defeat goes a long way to rallying troops and preserving the legend. But no matter what happened here, it's wildly immoral in my book. If it's fake, shame on them for misleading the public and for glorifying violence. If this is real, if this guy is an actual Swastika-Sporting Nazi proudly walking the streets of a modern-day Stalingrad, shame on them for stalking and cornering and assaulting a man simply for having the wrong opinions and the wrong ideas in his head. That's not heroism, that's terrorism. And I don't care how noble you think your intentions are, behind every terrorist is a firm belief in the pursuit of a greater good. So either way, this Seattle Antifa gang is a band of degenerates if you ask me, and I don't need to prove them as authentic or hoaxers in order to reach that conclusion. But I'm curious what you think. Do you buy this incident as presented, or is it some reasonably sophisticated stage work? There is a poll linked atop the description for you to vote, and I'm very curious to see the results after you do. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.